Made up putting mascara on the mustache, or can educating people stop wars? Welcome to this What Lies Behind podcast. First, a question for you. Part of the northeast of Ireland has a separate status from the rest of Ireland. What's it called, and where did it come from? And given its history of conflict, why don't more people ask more questions about it? How is their minds made up about it and for other conflicts? That's what this What Lies Behind podcast is about. First two statements. We can't see his moustache. And now, from Northern Ireland, the latest news from the province. In both of these, you're being fed a lie. The first mild, the second highly dangerous. The first provides you with a then staple part of a male leader, an authoritative moustache. The second with an active war, still masquerading as a basis for peace. Both help create what is normal, that is, what you are ordinarily expected to see and hear, and if not this, how you'd experience jangling. The first is Anthony Eden, Prime Minister in the 1950s, when a BBC production team arrived for his broadcast to the nation. Initially unwell, when he eventually prepared for the broadcast, his wife, seeing his image on the TV monitor, said nobody could see his moustache. So she found some mascara and applied it. So, normal service, what you'd expect, resumed. In the second, Northern Ireland is not a province. It's a political construct of just 6 of the 9 counties of Ulster. Its creation imposed a militarised partition of Ireland, and this is made to seem normal by using the mascara of language that of historical Ireland's 4 provinces and 32 counties. You may wonder how long this province should last. How is your mind made up on key issues that matter? How does normal become normal? Do dominant or monopoly suppliers provide mainstream makeup, so we think as we're told unthinkingly? What lies behind claims that to identify the what and why of what we're fed, we need independent makeup of critical, tin-opener questions which won't go away. Further, they might even help stop wars. But first, how is mainstream makeup created? This requires influencers with powerful platforms, comely leaders we are exhorted to admire, principled, trustworthy, actions based on truth, an accurate telling of reality, however uncomfortable. And if that leader publicly admits of the organisation he led, we didn't tell the truth, you might even be impressed. But what if his admission comes 50 years later? We call this post-mature extrapolation leadership, a safe admission confidently given now. But it is a cunning, deceptive, performative leadership. Why? Because it does not include 3 key admissions. 1, the sheer scale of the mainstream makeup needed to maintain the untruth, its colossal cost and damage, and 3, the cowardly offloading onto others to challenge and change it. So what truth and untruth are we talking about? The leader here was Sir Paul Fox, one of television's most distinguished former top execs, then controller of BBC One, Panorama editor, and later managing director of BBC Television. And the truth, according to The Observer, the 25th of February 24, British viewers were not told the truth of what was really happening in Northern Ireland in the 60s and 70s, in particular the discrimination against Catholics in work, education and housing. A decision was taken that the head of BBC Northern Ireland would censor the Catholics' viewpoint, Fox says. The bloody Protestants ran the BBC in Northern Ireland. Even when Catholics were burned out of their houses by loyalist mobs, with eventually British troops deployed to keep the peace, they were not to be called Catholics but refugees. All journalists were instructed to refer to Derry by its colonial name, but crucially to Northern Ireland as the province, never as the 6 counties, because this was Republican speak. The actual facts? Northern Ireland was explicitly created as a Protestant state for a Protestant people from 6 of the 9 counties of Ulster, which could provide an inbuilt Protestant majority, which in turn would govern exclusively for their benefit. It was designed as a militarily defensible, loyalist supremacist state. Remember, Fox's employer at the BBC had great power in truth shaping, telling ordinary people what to think. Here, this means a militant denial of the actual truth, and of any questions raising the validity of the state and just cause for resistance to it. But why raise these questions now? What Lies Behind aims to use carefully shaped questions, which we call democratic harpoons, to overthrow the obvious to unearth what should be more obvious to more people. The Northern Ireland example involves a key conflict which many British people have little knowledge or interest in. But what if they did and had a better background to this and other conflicts? We more than just ask questions to avoid war, but to recognise there is little chance of any pathway to conflict resolutions without posing and addressing key questions, more than obvious ones which go further, are rarely posed or risked, or which ask about the effects of not asking them. Here are some examples using the continuing history of Northern Ireland and Palestine. Northern Ireland, 5 questions. What is its origins and purpose? What makes a state legitimate, illegitimate, effective? Is MASCARA language being used? How and why? What does sectarian mean? Who are its main victims? Can war create equality? Palestine, 8 questions. When was the term terrorist first used by the British government in the Middle East? How can you make your different neighbours not be strangers in their own land, or say they hardly exist? What questions can you ask which your parents did not? How can you ensure an inherited trauma is not replicated against others? In what circumstances should we recalibrate how we see our own state? If a state behaves with impunity, how would you impugn that impunity? Is MASCARA language used? How and why? What 1948 book presented to the UN by Paul Robeson is most relevant right now? And finally, some more general questions. Which conflicts are expressed in an amulet of daunting words, intractable, terrorist, insoluble, and what are they designed to ward off? Does how it is presented create political illiteracy, literacy, dependence, or independence? Is a false truth being created? How is this defended? How are those challenging it named and treated? How is any ignorance being enriched? What do you think? What questions would you pose when you're told some issue is complex, intractable, or none of your business? For more, check us out at youtube.com, What Lies Behind Podcasts. Please subscribe, comment, share. Let us know what you think.